He's better than I am. Okay, this week's Sedra, and I'm sorry it's so chilly in here.
Yeah, I'm going to complain to the premises committee.
Pardon?
I'm going to complain to
You're going to complain to the premises committee. Okay. What do I want to talk about today? What I want to talk about today is to take a look a little bit and try and understand Esav. Let's try and get an idea of what's really going on with Esav, because he's certainly not the simple two-dimensional fellow we learn about in Cheder. At one level he is. He's not a very nice guy. He's done lots of naughty things. But on the other hand, he certainly has a very profound understanding and appreciation of Yitzchak. And he has a profound understanding and appreciation of the brachos of Yitzchak. And that's clear in the Sedra. He really gets upset when Yaakov Avinu gets the brachos rather than him. So how do we begin to deal with the idea of who and what Esav is? And that's what I want to talk about today, to try and grasp what it means to be Esav. And I have a whole bunch of questions from this week's Sedra, details and as well broader things. So for example, much of the Sedra deals with the Be'eros that Yitzchak dug. And then in addition to the Be'eros, we speak about the special bracha that Yitzchak Avinu had in his work. In fact, there's a big machlokes rishonim. Where do you know the din of Meiser from? Who gave Meiser? Who was the first person to give Meiser? No. Where's the first occasion of Meiser? The first occasion of Meiser is Avraham Avinu. When he meets up Malki Tzedek, Vayitin loy Meiser Mikol. He gives Malki Tzedek Meiser from everything. And so some Rishonim want to derive, that's where we know the din of Meiser. Others derive it from this week's Seder, where the Pasuk tells us, where do we have it? Digs these Be'eros. Where do we have this? Here we have it. Yisra Yitzchak, page 130. Perek Chavav, Pasuk Yud Beis. Vayisra Yitzchak ba'aretz hahi, vayimtza b'ashana hahi, meya sha'arim vayivracheyu Hashem. And Yitzchak planted in that land, and he discovered that year 100 times, and Hashem blessed him. And if you take a look in Rashi, what does Rashi say over here? Ba'aretz hahi, b'ashana hahi, meya sha'arim. Sha'amdu kam ru'ya lasos. That they assessed it, how much it should make, and it managed to make what should have made one and made 100 times. This assessment was for Maestris, and from here we learned the din of Maestris. Who else gave Maestris?
Who did he give Meiser to?
Who did Yitzchak give Meiser to? That's a good question.
There's no Kohanim.
There's no Kohanim, but just like Avraham Avinu gave to Malki Tzedek Meiser, and who was Malki Tzedek? Chazal tell us it was Shem, and Shem and Aver are alive at this time. After all, Yaakov at the end of this Seder will go off and learn in the yeshiva Shem ve'Aver. So that's where he gave Meiser to. Or it could be distribute the Meiser to Tzedakah, like we do today. Okay, but the idea of tithing is essential and part of what we're doing. So that's one way of understanding it. And obviously, who finally gives Meiser and promises Meiser eventually as well. Next week's Seder we'll have Yaakov Avinu promising Meiser. Aser asrenu loch. I will go and give meiser from everything that you give me, and I succeed. I want to put that aside for the moment. What's the relationship over here with this meiser, and where does it fit in exactly over here? So that's where we begin from, and another couple of questions. Let's start from the beginning of the Sedra as well, a number of questions. In the second pasuk of the Sedra, we identify Rivka very clearly. Vayhi Yitzchak ben Abraham Shalom bekachti es Rivka, when he took Rivka, Bas Besuel Arami miPadan Aram, who was the daughter of Besuel, the Aramite from Padan Aram, Achois Lavan Arami Loili Isha, the sister of Lavan Arami as his wife. So Rashi says over here, V'chi adayin lo nechtev shehi bas Besuel v'Achois Lavan miPadan Aram. Did we not already write that she is the daughter of Besuel and the sister of Lavan from Padan Aram? So Rashi tells over here, Lahagit Shvacha, to say your praise, Shoisa bas Rasha v'Achois Rasha, u'mekoimei ansha Rasha, v'lo lamda m'maaseyem, that she was the daughter of a Rasha, the sister of a Rasha, and she comes from a place of Rishayim, and she didn't actually learn from their behaviors. And we have to try and understand, why does Rashi want to tell us, and obviously why does the Pasuk want to remind us over here this tremendous shvach of Rivka, that she had to deal with Rishayim in what she did? What's the Pasuk? What's bothering Rashi? What's bothering the Pasuk that we need to speak about her this way at this point? Simple understanding. We've just explained who Yitzchak is, and Yitzchak is Ben Avram, the great son of Avram. Why should Rivka be worthy of taking him getting him as a husband? So we're answering that she's worthy because, notwithstanding the place that she grew up in, nevertheless, she was able to remain at Tzadekis. But perhaps, as we'll see later on, there's a deeper understanding exactly in what Rashi wants to say over here.
Isn't it because of her future role as matriarch?
Pardon?
Isn't it her future role as matriarch?
Well, we'll try and understand her future role as a matriarch, what specific aspect of her being a matriarch and her specific behaviors are reflected from this point, from the knowledge of what it says over here. Let's take it a little bit further. That's one question.
The real problem with Esau is he's got the same genealogy.
He's got absolutely.
He's got good yichus.
He's got great yichus.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What happened over there? So let's see another couple of Rashis that Rashi mentions over here that just add to the questions until I'll try and give an answer that I think will try and add up to the point. So we know that Yisrael Tzesu Abanim B'Kirba. The pasuk tells us, pasuk Chav Beis, the children agitated within her. What does this word Yisrael Tzesu Abanim B'Kirba? We all know the famous medrash that Rashi brings. So if you take a look in the second column over here, right in the middle of the second column, Rabbi Seinu pasuk Chav Beis, Rabbi Seinu Dershua Loshen Ritza. It's an expression of running. And Kishahoisa Oiveris Al Pischei Torah Shel Shem Ve'ever, when she would go by the openings of Torah, the Beis Medrash of Shem and Ever, Yaakov Ratzum Afrachesis Lotzeitz, Yaakov would run and push to come out. Oiveris Al Pischei Avodah Zarah, she passes by idolatry. Esav mefarches lotzeitz. Esav wants to go out. Dover acher, Rashi gives another pshat. Misreitzitzim ze'im ze. They were fighting with one another. Merivin, and they were arguing benachla shnei olamos, the inheritance of two worlds. Now this Rashi is exceedingly tamua, is exceedingly strange. The most basic question over here. Do we believe that a person is predestined from the womb to be good or to be bad? No? Obviously not. Pardon?
Both I thought were.
That's not
good
our
and bad.
belief. Pardon?
I thought we believed it was both. That's the battle.
We can make choices. So what's going on over here that Yaakov is a tzaddik in the womb, Esav is a rasha in the womb, Esav has no choice but to go out and to be an evil person. How do we understand it? Rashi is saying something over here, but what he's saying is so temua. And another question, another simple question. What's the davar acher? Merivim benachlas shnei olamis. They're fighting about the inheritance for two worlds. What does it mean they're fighting about two worlds? Isn't it that Esav was happy with this world and Yaakov was happy with the next world? Why are they fighting? Get a mediator in there and it would be simple to solve. You have Olam Haba, you have Olam Haza, and Shalom Al Yisrael. And on Esav. What's going on in this Rashi? What's Rashi telling us? Obviously, Esav is not just interested in Olam Haza. Esav is interested in Olam Haba. Certainly at this point, Esav is interested in Olam Haba. And yet he's mevacheses lotzitz, he wants to get out. Where when she goes over Pischei Olam, Pischei Avodah Zarah. And Yaakov is interested in Olam Haza. And yet, he only wants to get out when you go by Shem Ve'ever. Again, what's going on in this Rashi? How do we understand? And what's it telling us about Esav and Yaakov? And what's it telling us really what's going on about Esav? Let's take a look a little bit further. We identify exactly what Esav is. He's Edom, goes through over there. We'll leave that, and Yaakov holds on to his Ekev. I'm not going to go through that now. We're going to leave that. But take a look at what Rashi says in Pasuk Chav Zayin, page 126, 3 lines up in the first column of Rashi. So the pasuk says, "Vayigdelu hana'arim," that these children grew up. Pasuk Chav Zayin, "Vayigdelu hana'arim, vayihi Esav ish yodei tzayid ish sadeh, v'Yaakov ish tom yoshev oholim." These children grew up, and Esav comes out to be an ish yodei tzayid, a man who knows trapping. He translates here. Hunting, a man in the field. The Yaakov Yishtam Yeshiv Aholim, and Rashi says, what does it mean? Vayigdu al the Orim, Vayihi Esav. Kol's man shoyuktanim, so long as they were young, loyhayu nikarim b'maaseyim vein odam b'daktik b'hem ativa. So long as they were yet young, so nobody could tell in their behavior the differences between them. Kevin Shanasu b'nei Yud Gimel Shana, once they become 13 years old, Zeh Pirish L'Bati Midrashos, V'Zeh Pirish L'Avodah Zarah. One goes to the Beis HaMedrash and the other one goes to idolatry. Okay? Based on this, at what age did Esav turn sour? What's Rashi saying? Which age did Esav turn sour? After 13. When he was 13 years old, Vayigdalu Hanaorim reached the age of 13. Something happened there that became a problem. Okay, that's one thing. Then let us try and understand. Rashi goes on. Yodei Tzayid. What does it mean to be Yodei Tzayid? Lotzud u'lerama says aviv b'fiv. Esav knows how to capture and charm and to trick his father with his mouth. V'sheyal, And he would ask him, Abba, my father, how can you take meiser from salt and from straw? His father thought that he was a medaktik b'mitzvahs. Was it so easy to fool Asa, to fool Yitzchak? At this point, and this is when, at what age is this? This is at the age of 13. But somehow already in that question there is inherently a problem, and there's a question that already says that he's turning to idolatrous behavior, and it has to do with Meiser. We're going to see, can come back to that idea later again. And Ish Sada, he's a person who deals with the sea, with the field. But Rashi, we juxtapose, we put aside and put next to him, Eni is an Ish Tom, Eni Baki B'chol Eila, El Kiliboy Kein Piv. He's not a Ramoy, he doesn't know how to trick people, but as his heart, so is his mouth. Misha'ena Choref L'Ramoy's Karitam. Somebody who's not sharp to be able to lie to people, we refer to as a tam. So straight away, we're comparing Yaakov and Esav, and Rashi is spelling out what's the difference. Esav is able to fool people, and Yaakov is not able to fool people. He's an Ishtam. So it's a little bit different to how we understand until now. The difference between Yaakov and Esav is not simply in the fact that one's a hunter and one stays home, but actually in the ability and the skill to act, to be able to fool others. The idea, as we will see later, that we refer to Esav as tzayid b'fiv. He's able to capture with his mouth. Esav was a really charismatic guy. He was big, he was strong, he was out in the field, he was a successful fellow, he was exceedingly charismatic. He could fool you. He was tzayid b'fiv. But what's going on? And Yaakov doesn't fool you. Yaakov is what he is. And we're going to try and understand that a little bit more in another moment. And what is Yoshev Aholim? He sits in the tents of Shem and Aver, sitting and learning. As Rashi says in Madrasha, Tzayid B'fiv, as the pasuk continues, Vayesav Ish Yodzeh, V'yev Yitzchak is Esav, Ki Tzayid B'fiv, Rivka Yeheves is Yaakov. And then the pasuk tells us, in pasuk Chavches, that Yitzchak loves Esav because he's able to capture with his mouth, and Rivka Yeheves is Yaakov, and Rivka loves Yaakov. So what does Rashi say? Ki tzayid b'fiv, b'fiv shel Esav, sheyotzad oisayo marmeu b'dvarav. He was able to trap him and fool him with his words. And once again, to try and understand what happened over here. After all, was Yitzchak so foolish to actually make a mistake? And then we go on. So V'yozed Yaakov, what does the pasuk say? V'yozed Yaakov nozid, and Yaakov is making these lentils. And again, Rashi comes and he tells us the story about why is Yaakov making lentils exactly over here. So take a look what Rashi says. Shalohira that V'oisi Ayoyme Savram brings from the Bereshis Rabbah. On that day, Avraham died. Shaloyira Esav Mem Beno Yoitzel Tarbus Rab. In order that he shouldn't see Esav, his grandson, go out in a bad way. Lefiv Chav Kotzah HaKadosh Baruch Hu Eishnoyim Eshanim Yishnoisav. Hashem cut 5 years from his life. Sheyitzchak Chai Kuf Pei Shana V'zeh Kuf Ayin Hei Shana. Yitzchak lived 180 years and he lived 175 years, and he was cooking at over here the Adoshim, And how old were they when this happened? No? When did this happen? Figure it out. How old was Yitzchak when his children were born? No? How old was Yitzchak when his children were born? It says earlier in the Sedra. No? He was 60 years old. How old was Avram when Yitzchak was born? No? How old was Avram when Yitzchak was born? Avram was 100 years old when Yitzchak was born. How old were the boys therefore now at this point? Avram was 160 when the boys were born. At this point he dies and he's 175. So how old are the boys now? They're 15 years old. But if Esav went out Latarbus Row when he was 13, what went on in these 2 years? What's going on? Where did we get two lost years over here? How do we understand what's going on over here? Another question. Let's look a little bit further. We have all the stories that take place over here. And let's take a look when Rivka convinces Yaakov to trick his father. So he goes in dressed as Esau. And Rashi and the Pasuk says, in Pasuk Chav Beis, Vayigash Yaakov el Yitzchak Aviv, and Yaakov came to Yitzchak his father, Vayimu Sheyu, when he feels him, Vayomer, and he says, Hakol kol Yaakov, Vayadayim Yedei Esav, the voice is the voice of Yaakov, and the hands are the hands of Esav. How do we know that it's Kol Yaakov? So Rashi says, Shemedaber b'loshen tachnunim. He spoke nicely. Kumna, please get up. Aval Esav b'loshen kantur yadiber. Esav spoke harshly. Yokom avi, get up, my father. If Yitzchak was able to discern in this speech pattern between Yaakov and Esav, sufficient to have the knowledge that Yaakov speaks like a mensch and Esav doesn't speak like a mensch. How could Yitzchak make a mistake and want to give these brachas to Esav? But it's not only that. Because Rashi says, Shem Shamayim Shomer B'fiv. Where do we have that? He was able to see. Where do we have it? Pardon? Chaf? Chaf Aleph. Kishana. Ein ze derech Esav liyeh Shem Shamayim Shomer B'fiv. V'zeh omer ki hikra Hashem Elokecha. He has the Shem Shamayim meant. Once again, so Esav doesn't mention Shem Shamayim. Esav is always talking to Yitzchak without any sense of dignity, without any sense of respect. And still, he's fooled by Esav. How do we understand what's going on over here? Let's try and understand it in a more profound way. The key answer that I'm giving is actually based on the words of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Mashal. With B'Taisus Neifach Mishali, a couple of additional points that I've added in, but the key word, the key insight, and that's this one, comes from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He tells us that in the Pirush Mishnayos LaRambam, so in his introduction to Perek HaChelik in Sanhedrin, when it begins to discuss those who have no portion in the world to come, so just before that there is what the section known as Shmoina Parakim LaRambam, the 8 chapters of the Rambam, where he discusses a number of very basic philosophical elements and attitudes towards Torah and to tzaddikim and to other points. And over there the Rambam spells out, he says there are different kinds of tzaddikim. You have a person who's a tzaddik, who is naturally a tzaddik. Whatever he does, he's going to do, just has a natural tendency to go and do what's right. That's one kind of a tzaddik. Never struggled, never had to battle to deal with that reality. That's one kind of a tzaddik. You have another kind of a tzaddik. That tzaddik has to struggle with the real world. Lives in the real world and deals with the real world in order to be able to appreciate it. That's what Chazal say. The b'makim shebalei tshuva oimdim ein tzadikim gemurim yochaylam la'amoy. You have tzadikim gemurim who are naturally tzadikim. They never did anything wrong. They never had to struggle. And you have balei tshuva, taket tzadikim. But they had to go through the struggle to achieve who they are and what they are. That kind of a struggle, that kind of a tzaddik is a different kind. There are those two different realities in the world. The others, we find that they lived that reality. In other words, Avraham had both those things, had a tendency, he was able to figure it out and do what was right, and at the same time he had to deal with nisyonis. He had to deal with tests. We don't find that by Yaakov, for example, that Yaakov is put through tests. Yaakov is mitosei shleima. Yaakov is perfect. Yaakov is an ishtam, and he's considered, he's the Merkava, he's the perfect example of what a person can be. He's a tzaddik gomer, has a natural inclination to do what's right. And what Yitzchak saw was, look, I have 2 children. Both of them are tzaddikim. I've got Yaakov, who's a natural tzaddik. I have another son, Esav. My son, Esav, lives in the real world. He's in Edom. He's in Yishoda. He lives here. But that doesn't mean he's not a tzaddik. For 2 years he can get by. There's something that happened by Yigdalu Hana Orim. There's something that happened at the age of 13 that brought about that 2 years later when Avraham Avinu dies. And when Avraham Avinu dies, he feels he can do exactly what he wants. He doesn't feel that yet. In other words, when he's 13, something happens at that point. Something strange happens at that point that already turns him in another direction. But it's only when Avraham Avinu actually dies that he feels he can do whatever he wants. And he goes off to do Baisa Yom Chazal tell us, as Rashi says, on that day he transgressed both Avodah Zarah, Gili Arayos, and Shvichas Damim, did all three of the terrible Averis. And we already put him in a different place. Exactly what happened when he was 13, we'll touch in a minute. But what was Yitzchak's perspective on him was that he's a tzaddik who struggles. So therefore he wants to deal with Melech and with straw. He's dealing with salt and with teven and with straw. He wants to know how to deal with the parts of the real world that really don't seem to have any value. How do you deal with it? How do you make it something? That's Yitzchak sees in his son Esav. That's his struggle. To be a great man here in this world and struggle with the reality of it. Rivka doesn't agree. Why doesn't Rivka agree? And why is Yitzchak able to be fooled? Yitzchak is able to be fooled because Yitzchak grew up in Avram's house. While Rivka is not fooled because she grew up with Besuel and Nova. Yitzchak grew up in Avram's house, and Yitzchak was blinded by the Akedah. We say in the pasuk over here that Yitzchak, Vatechena Einav Meroyis, he can no longer see, and the Medrash says that because of the Malachim that he saw at the Akedah, Yitzchak lived the reality of being holy and good. He couldn't leave Eretz Yisrael because he couldn't go out and see the real world. He couldn't deal with it. He couldn't see it. But Rivka, who grew up in her father's house with her brother and knew what it means to be a liar and a trickster, so she knows that, yeah, there are people who struggle with this world, but there are also people who fail in that struggle. Yitzchak never experienced somebody who failed in that struggle. He struggled, his father struggled, they won, they succeeded, they were righteous, they were tzaddikim. And he figured that's what's going to be true about Esav as well. He lives in this world, and he struggles, and he wins. Rivka knows that's not the case. And so they can't work it out. Because Rivka's experienced it, that's why she knows it's not the case. Now let's take it just a little bit further and a little bit deeper and answer all our questions. But Yisrael Alban Bikir. Nobody is predestined to be a tzaddik. Nobody is predestined to be a Rasha. But people have inclinations. And people have different kinds of struggles, and our children, each of them are different. And everyone has their own struggles, their own space, their own place, where it's easier, and even amongst ourselves, we know we're probably different from our siblings, and our struggles are different from our siblings' struggles. And so, over here, Yaakov has a natural tendency to be in Ishtam, Yoshev Ahal. Esav doesn't have that tendency. His natural tendency is to be an Ish Sodom, to struggle with this world. It doesn't for a moment mean that when he's in the womb, he doesn't want Olam Haba. In the womb, he still knows what's right. He wants Olam Haba as well. Yaakov in the womb wants not only Olam Haba, but also recognizes that his job is Olam Hazeh. They get born. And then they're reflective. The more Esav rejects, so to speak, Olam Haba and turns to Olam Hazeh, the exact opposite happens by Yaakov. The more he rejects Olam Hazeh, and the more he's only focused on Olam Haba. Doesn't want it to be different. What happens in the end? In the end, Esav loses his Olam Haba because he makes the poor choices. But Yaakov actually learns to live in Olam Hazeh. Who teaches him to learn in Olam Hazeh? His mother teaches him. To get the brachas, to get these brachas from Esav, you got to learn to be Ochi Anochi B'Ramois. I know how to trick people. I learned it from my brother and my father. And I have to teach you how to live in this world and to know that that's how you have to deal with the realities of this world. You've got to learn how to deal with it. Even though, as we say later, that im Loven Garti v'tayad mitzvahs shamarti. I lived with Lavan, but I stayed in Erlich Yid, but I learned how to deal with you and him and to deal with the reality of this world. So we've explained why the Torah introduces Rivka in such detail, as she's a tzaddikas who manages to succeed in the world of Aram Na'arayim, in the place of all this trickery and lies, and she's still a tzaddikas, and she manages to use those skills in doing what's right and teaching Yaakov to a certain extent. That's how you got to live. Esav recognizes, Esav knows all the time what's really right. He knows, they say in the name, I once heard from Rav Schneebal, told me in the name of the Imre Chaim of Vishnitz, that he once said he wanted to split his yeshiva. Wanted to split it between those who want to learn and
Those who think they have to learn.
Pardon?
Those that think they have to learn.
Those who want to learn and those who learn. Okay? Asa wanted to do what's good. He just didn't do it. He knew what was right the whole way through. And when it comes to the opportunity for the brachas, he knows that's what he wants. He wants those brachas. But to get those brachas, you have to live a certain way. You have to do it and not only dream about it and not only hope for it. The real Ramos, the real sense of honesty of Yaakov was to know himself thoroughly, and the real trickery of Esau was not just that he fooled his father, but he actually fooled himself. Once you start tricking and fooling others, you end up fooling yourself. And he thought he could get the brachas by using all his trickery and his means and his ways. It doesn't work like that. What about Yitzchak? Why didn't he see through?
Maybe he didn't want to.
Well, maybe he didn't want to, but maybe there's a little bit more in that as well. Because what skills do you need? What's the difference in the main between the tzaddik who serves Hashem naturally, positively, and the tzaddik who has to struggle? Often the difference is, do you serve Hashem me'ava or do you serve Hashem me'yira? A tzaddik who comes naturally to loves what he's doing. That's his natural love. And so that's what he is. To serve Hashem me'yira as Esav needed to was a much greater struggle. And when you serve Hashem me'yira, you don't want to mention Hashem's name because I'm scared of Hashem. So the fact that Esav never mentioned of Hashem's name and it wasn't Shogar B'fiv wasn't by Yitzchak a chesaron about Esav. Wasn't lacking anything. Because that's the fellow he is. He serves Hashem me'yira. He fights to deal with the reality of this world. That's what it's about. That's the essential point of what Yitzchak sees. And therefore he's not bothered that Esav speaks a bit harshly. Because that's what Esav is like. He's dealing with the tough realities of this world, so it doesn't bother me. Yaakov, of course Yaakov could be talking nicely and loving Hashem and speaking nicely. He doesn't have the same struggles. By him it goes easy. What's Yaakov's struggle? Yaakov's struggle is to lie. Yaakov's struggle is to cheat. Be able to convince. He doesn't want to go, and his mother has to convince him to go and steal the brachas. Doesn't go so easy. And I think that's a mahalach, and we haven't had a chance to see this in the various mefarshim that I brought over here. But one of the things that I wanted to point out very quickly, just to go through it, is to see, if you take a look in the third point, da kisayda ma'asers from the Shla Kodesh, kisayda ma'asers kisayda brachos hakol holech al mokem echad. The secret behind ma'aser and the secret behind brachos all comes together. And with this I understand now actually why the idea of Maasros is so rooted in this Sedra, which revolves around the question of brachos. Esav is asking Yitzchak about Maasros, about physical Maasros, things that have no value in this world, or some things that are physical, the most basic physical things, salt and straw, because he wants brachos. So he's actually dealing with Maasros, and he's convincing Yitzchak, I deserve the brachos because I'm involved in Maasros. And just like Yitzchak gave Maaser, and so therefore, and he was oimid the soda, he assessed the field for the purpose of Maasros, and he had unusual bracha in the field 100 times what he should have gotten. That's why our Seder revolves around these things, about Esav involved in Maaser and searching for brachas, because they are interdependent. Okay? There are other aspects of this that we can keep if you want to go through the sheet. There's some actual very interesting things we didn't have a chance. Shane. Stop over here.